Welcome to our Halfling, where we talk about Lord of the Rings and a little bit about D&D. So let's get to it. So today we are going over chapter 12 of the Silmarillion, of Men. So this chapter begins talking about how the Valar are very proud of themselves for giving Middle-earth the sun. And they're good. They're like, yep, that's all we're going to do. Peace out. And they kind of leave Middle-earth alone after that. And it says that Ulmo is the only one that gathers news from Middle-earth to give back to the Valar. That's it. Morgoth goes unchecked and is doing his thing, and that only the Noldor will attack him or give him any issues, but that's it. The Valar are just doing their thing now. It's just very frustrating. But the chapter goes on to say that because of the sun, that Middle-earth is now sort of in this springtime, everything's growing and flourishing, and that even the Eldar are now increasing, that they're multiplying now, and that we're just in this, everything is just very green and fair. And it does say that when the sun first rose in the west, the men awoke, and that nobody knew that they were going to awake, obviously. And Manwë said he didn't know where they were going to be awoken. But yes, when the first rising of the sun, the men awake in the land of Hildorian. And it says that because the sun rose in the west, it was the first thing that the men saw, and that the men strayed in that way, that they strayed towards the west. The chapter also says that the men were given many names. So I'm going to list these names for you. The Atani, they were named by the Eldar, the second people, but they called them also Hildor, the followers, and many other names. Apanonar, the afterborn, Angwar, the sickly, and Firimar, the mortals. And they named them the usurpers, the strangers, and the inscrutable, the self-cursed, the heavy-handed, the night-fearers, the children of the sun. So not necessarily kind names for men. The sickly and usurpers, strangers, not exactly kind words for men. It says that there are few tales in the beginning except for the Atanatari, men who traveled north. It says that the Valar never came to guide them, never asked them to go to Valinor, and that the men ended up fearing rather than loving the Valar and didn't understand their purpose, which in my notes I said, same. What y'all doing over there? And it does say that Ulmo did try to send messages to the men. However, men were unable to understand those messages, but they did grow a love and passion for the waters, which, going way back to when we were introduced to the Valar, Ulmo has a horn that when played, it gives this desire and passion for water, which is essentially what has happened here, that the men, without really understanding why, have grown this love for water. And it says that after some time, the men do meet the Moriquendi and become friends, and it says disciples, that they learn from the Moriquendi. And here they learn about Valinor and the Valar from those who also only know the Valar through name and rumor. Like, they haven't exactly had full contact with the Valar either. It does say that the sun caused Morgoth to go into hiding, which then allowed the men to wander Middle-earth in joy and bliss, and that this is basically the dawn where the dew has not yet dried on the grass. And so, basically that, this is all rainbows and butterflies right now, but everything's about to boil over. And it says that the lies that Morgoth had put in place in Valinor, the curse of the kinslain Alquilande, and Feanor's oath. All of that is sort of brewing in the background, just waiting to boil over. And that all the stories that we have read thus far and that we will continue to read are only a fraction of the history, that we're only reading about the Noldor and the Silmarils, but that there's a fuller history behind that. And that elves and men at this point are very similar in body. So it says they're similar in body, and that they still have this fire in their spirit, that they're still kind of young and at heart, I guess, and that the men really are young. And the concern, though, is that men are very frail. It's much easier to kill them, whether it be by weapon, it says by mischance, by sickness, or just by age. And that elves are unsure what happens to men once they die. There's a belief that there might be a hall in Mandos for them, but that basically Mandos, Eru, and then Manwe are the only ones who actually know what happens to men once they die. And that men cannot return. Like, once they've died, they can't come back to life, except for Beren, that he's the only one to have been noted down as being someone who died and returned, but that he touched a Silmaril and that he never spoke to mortals again. So, and that basically all of that's not entirely told in the music of the Ainur, that this was part of that sort of mystery part that wasn't totally divined to all of the Valar. And it says that at first, men and elves were allies and friends, and that there were some men in the beginning who actually learned from the Eldar and became so valiant that they actually became captains of the Noldor. But after time and Morgoth's later triumph, that elves and men end up going their own way. That men usurp the sun and that elves basically go to woods and caves and really only come out to see the moonlight and the stars, and that they're basically just becoming shadows and memories, which is more of what we see in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that's this chapter. It's very short. However, I have thoughts. This is a very short chapter, so maybe I shouldn't have this many thoughts, but this was very frustrating. That the Valar do nothing. That literally the men are learning about them through elves who haven't actually seen them in entirety. All they really know of the Valar is as the powers in battle. They just see them as these big angry beings, and Valinor is only just a rumor to them. The men are only learning about the Valar through elves who don't really know about them entirely either. And the Valar are not doing anything. It's very frustrating to me that the very first paragraph of this chapter is saying that the Valar are like, hey, we gave them sun, so they're good now. Figure it out. Are you kidding me? What are y'all doing? I was just very livid when I read this, because they've already taken the elves from Middle-earth to Valinor because they didn't want to have to mess with Morgoth. That's my opinion. And so it was just easier to bring the elves with them. But there were still elves left in Middle-earth that they totally forgot about. And then they're like, we're not even going to bother with men. Just good luck, guys. I was very, very mad. And then this whole time, Morgoth is entirely unchecked. Yeah, he's hiding because of the sun, but that's a Band-Aid. A very temporary Band-Aid. So I was just very livid with that. I don't know if this is what this meant. It's just what I interpreted as. But that the elves and the men were similar in body at this point. And I almost feel like because the elves were in Valinor all this time, or the Eldar were in Valinor all this time, they're almost stunted. if you think about the Sindar and how much they were able to advance on their own versus everybody else, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess the Noldor and the Teleri and the Vanyar, I mean, they did advance, but I don't know. It's very different from the Sindar, in my opinion, because they're more figuring it out on their own in the same way that the men are figuring it out on their own. And so I almost feel like the Eldar are a little stunted, I guess. Maybe not entirely, but that was just kind of my personal opinion on that. And that the elves really seem concerned about death, which makes sense. They don't die, so I mean, it makes sense that they would be curious about that. But it just, with all the names that they have for men, and that what happens to men once they die is like such a concern for them, I almost feel like there's this, which maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a common opinion, but it's almost like the elves are a little jealous of men, that they have this time frame. Like, they're not bound to the earth for all eternity, or, you know, for as long as the earth is there. That men actually have this cycle, which is also represented in the world itself, because now we have the sun, and so you have growing, you have seasons, you have, you know, this cycle of life and death, which the men, you know, they embody that, and elves don't. They're kind of outside of all of it. So I just found that interesting, but more than anything, I was just very upset with the Valar at this point in time. So yeah, it's a short chapter, but I had thoughts and feelings. I wanted to share that. So yeah, I would love to know what your guys' opinions are on the Valar in particular. Like, do you see something that I'm not seeing? I don't know. What's your opinion? I'd love to know. Leave a comment down below. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and may the hair on your toes never fall out. Bye.